that the chair be authorized to declare a recess at any time. Without objection, so ordered. Without objection, the first reading of the bill is dispensed with, and the mark is open to amendment at any point. Without objection, members have 5 legislative days within which to submit written statements to be made part of the record. So ordered. With that, I'm going to make a couple of opening statements, remarks, and then turn it over to the ranking member if he has any remarks. I welcome my colleagues to the Strategic Forces Subcommittee's markup of National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2024. I want to thank the members of the subcommittee and especially Ranking Member Moulton for the work they've done this year. This subcommittee has a strong history of bipartisan cooperation, and the mark we have before us today reflects a continuation of that bipartisan approach. First and foremost, this mark supports the ongoing effort to modernize our nuclear deterrent. It modernizes the supporting laboratory and production infrastructure managed by the Department of Energy's National Nuclear Security Administration. It invests in both homeland and regional missile defenses. It also continues to support the Department of Defense's transition from legacy space architectures to more capable and resilient constellations. The mark will accelerate the development of offensive and defensive hypersonic capabilities. This is one area where the United States severely lags behind China and Russia, and closing this gap has been one of my top priorities as chairman. To close this gap, we must expand our test infrastructure and add additional range space to fully meet the demand for hypersonic flight testing and to evaluate missile endgame performance. Building on measures included in last year's authorization bill, the subcommittee mark includes a provision that requires the department to evaluate and conduct the associated environmental review processes for additional air corridors for hypersonic testing. It also includes provisions to strengthen congressional oversight over the department's activities by establishing a major force program for nuclear command, control, and communications programs. It will also require the department to develop an integrated master schedule for the Sentinel missile program. The mark includes a requirement for the department to notify Congress about nuclear cooperation between Russia and China. This subcommittee has played a key role in highlighting the way Russia fuels China's nuclear breakout, and this is something we will continue to closely monitor. In military space, we continue to find ways to drive innovation and support commercial and small business contributions to the space enterprise. If we are truly going to get the benefit of our commercial partners, especially on the use of commercial space situational awareness data for combatant commanders, we need to incentivize and create more opportunities to share information on the threats they will face. This requires addressing the overclassification of space systems by mandating a relook at classification guidance documents. In closing, I'd like to thank the subcommittee staff led by Ryan Tolle and professional staff members Whitney Verrett, Peter Schertzinger, and Maria Vastola for their efforts this year. I'd also like to express my appreciation to Bryn Willicott and Julia Valenzuela on my staff, Zach Calderon, the Strat Research Assistant, and staffers from other personal offices for their great contributions. The chair will now recognize Mr. Moulton, the ranking member on the subcommittee, for any opening remarks he would like to make.
Thank you, Chairman Lamborn. First, I would like to extend my gratitude to you and members on both sides of the aisle for continuing the long tradition of keeping this subcommittee mark bipartisan and addressing areas that we discussed in the past 3 months of hearings and briefings. Every day, you can read the headlines, and the jurisdiction of this subcommittee is front and center, whether it be on the criminal war waged by war criminal Vladimir Putin in Ukraine, to quote my friend from South Carolina, and his threats of nuclear war, the increased long-range ballistic missile testing being conducted by North Korea, or the dramatic and unprecedented expansion of China's intercontinental ballistic missile fleet, not to mention their weaponization of space. This subcommittee has in its jurisdiction some of the most technical, complex, and consequential issues of any committee in Congress. While I firmly believe this world would be a better, safer place for our children without nuclear weapons, a view shared by many of us with backgrounds in physics who understand the sobering statistical realities of the universe. The reality today is that our nuclear deterrent is a key component of our strategic stability so long as we have determined adversaries unwilling to engage in serious discussions of arms reduction. Despite what some have tried to argue on the subcommittee, without the support of a single witness who has appeared before us, our nuclear deterrent remains a credible and stabilizing force. One example of proof is the fact that over a year into the war in Ukraine, despite Putin's huge losses and persistent threats, the conflict has remained conventional. Given the aging weapons and infrastructure across the nuclear weapons complex, this mark begins to address delays to programs, including Sentinel and W80-4, by increasing oversight and requiring the Department and NNSA conduct more rigorous program management to ensure that our nuclear forces remain safe, secure, and reliable to provide the most credible deterrent in the world. While we have much work to do to maintain our nuclear deterrent into the future, the space domain is evolving at a far faster pace. For decades, space was essentially a peaceful domain reserved for monitoring, communicating, and exploring, but no more. In just the past several months, we have seen unprecedented demonstrations of both Russian and Chinese capabilities that are specifically designed to degrade and destroy U.S. space assets. To employ a more robust and resilient architecture, this mark continues to press the Department to leverage commercial capability when available and improve its sharing of threat data with commercial companies that provide services to the DoD. It also continues to emphasize the fact that the Department needs to have a coherent, unclassified strategy when it comes to space in order to explain the threats and the stakes to the American people, which has long been a position of this subcommittee in Congress. Across missile defense and hypersonics, the mark largely maintains the status quo for our existing systems. In these areas, I have serious concern about how our decisions, actions, and statements are perceived to avoid a future arms race or worse, a miscalculation that could have catastrophic effects. As we move forward to the Chairman's mark, we must take a critical eye to changes that seem sensible in the short run, but could precipitate an arms race in the long run if we are not careful. And I encourage everyone on the subcommittee to find a critical eye for the full committee markup. That is our job. Finally, I would like to take this opportunity to give my sincere thanks to our subcommittee staff, Ryan Tully, Whitney Verrett, Peter Schertzinger, Maria Vastola, and Zach Calderon, and to my personal staff, Caroline Jones, and our Navy fellow, Kurt Shalkidas. This mark is a result of the months-long bipartisan process to keep our long-standing tradition of producing an annual defense authorization bill, and it largely represents consistency and continuity. Despite the fact that we are the only subcommittee with an amendment and won't win any points for the fastest markup this time around, I strongly urge my colleagues to support it as we move forward with the process of passing this year's National Defense Authorization Act.
I thank the ranking member for his leniency and his compassion on our one amendment that we have coming up. Thank you for your remarks. We will now proceed to mark up H.R. 2670, the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2024. Copies of our subcommittee mark and directive report language were made available and distributed to member offices on Friday, June 9th. Is there any discussion or questions on the subcommittee mark? Seeing none, the chair will lay before members the text of the subcommittee mark for consideration. Are there any amendments to the subcommittee mark? I have an amendment. I think you're all aware of it. It's at the desk, log 01. Will the clerk please distribute the amendment? And I think you can see it on the screens in front of you. Without objection, the reading of the amendment is dispensed with. The purpose of this amendment is to fix a clerical error that removes 2 extraneous pages that were inadvertently inserted into the Strat mark. Is there any debate on the amendment? Gentleman from California.
Not on the amendment. I actually missed the opportunity earlier to comment on the total bill. I want to thank you for the integrated master schedule for the Sentinel and would urge your consideration that the same be required for the NNSA's work on its nuclear weapon production. Okay, so we can talk about that in the full committee, but thank you.
Very good. I look forward to that discussion. Any other comments on this amendment in particular? If not, the question is on the adoption of the amendment offered by myself. So many as are in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the amendment is adopted. Are there any additional amendments to the subcommittee mark? Okay, if not, the question now occurs on the adoption of the mark as amended. So many as are in favor will say aye. 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 Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the mark is adopted. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Wilson, for the purpose of a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the subcommittee report the mark as amended favorably to the full committee.
The question is on the motion of the gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Wilson. So many as are in favor will say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, no. A quorum being present, the ayes have it, and the motion is adopted. Without objection, a motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. I ask unanimous consent to that the staff be authorized to make necessary conforming, technical, and clerical changes and to remove the mark as amended, from the mark as amended, provisions that would cause the mark to refer to other committees or would result in additional direct spending. Without objection, so ordered. There being no further legislative business before the subcommittee, this meeting is adjourned.
Here, here. Congratulations. You made it through.